"Don't look at me," she whispered, bruised and barefoot, but the rancher fell to one knee and said. The storm had broken suddenly, leaving the prairie soaked in rain and the sky heavy with gray. Jacob, a rugged rancher with weathered hands, was on his way back to the barn when he saw her, stumbling down the dirt road, barefoot, her dress torn, and her face streaked with tears. She stopped when she noticed him, clutching her arms around herself as if to disappear. "Don't look at me," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of shame and fear. She turned as if to run, but Jacob was already moving toward her, his boots sinking into the wet earth. There was no judgment in his eyes, only concern and a fierce protectiveness she had never known. When he reached her, he dropped to one knee, not out of weakness but out of reverence. "Miss," he said softly, his tone steady as the ground beneath them, "you've been through hell. But hear me now, you don't ever have to hide from me." His calloused hand rested lightly over his heart, promising safety without demanding trust. She trembled, torn between flight and the desperate desire to believe him. No man had ever looked at her that way, like she was more than the bruises, more than the broken pieces of her past. For the first time in a long time, she let herself breathe, just a little. Jacob rose slowly, offering her his coat and his hand. "Come with me," he said, voice low but sure. "I'll see to it you're safe, and you'll never have to walk barefoot in the storm again." And though doubt lingered in her eyes, her fingers found his, and held on. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, except for the patter of rain dripping from the brim of Jacob's hat. He had lifted her onto his horse, wrapping his coat around her trembling frame. She sat stiff at first, like a frightened doe ready to bolt, but the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and Jacob's solid presence behind her eased her trembling little by little. When they reached the ranch house, the glow of lamplight spilled across the porch. Jacob helped her down gently, careful not to startle her. "You're safe here," he said simply, guiding her inside. The warmth of the fire crackling in the hearth seemed almost foreign to her, like she had forgotten what comfort felt like. She sat at the edge of the chair while Jacob knelt again, this time tending to her scraped feet. He worked with quiet patience, his rough hands surprisingly gentle as he wrapped them in clean bandages. She watched him, fighting the urge to speak and the fear of being seen too clearly. Finally, she whispered, "Why are you being so kind to me? You don't even know my name." Her voice wavered, fragile but searching. Jacob looked up, his gaze steady and unyielding. "Because everyone deserves a chance to be treated with dignity," he said. "And because someday, when you're ready, I'd like to know your name, not the name of the pain you've carried, but the one that's truly yours." For a long moment she only stared at him, the firelight flickering in her wide, uncertain eyes. Then, as if testing the weight of the truth, she whispered, "Clara. My name is Clara." The syllables were soft, almost fragile, but Jacob heard the strength it took to speak them. He gave a small nod, as though her name was the most important thing he had ever been told. "Clara," he repeated, letting it rest on his tongue with a quiet reverence. "It suits you." She looked away quickly, her hands twisting in her lap. "It doesn't suit what I've been through," she murmured. Jacob leaned back on his heels, the fire casting shadows across his strong features. "What you've been through isn't who you are," he said firmly. "It's just a road you walked. And now you're here." His words sank into her like a bomb, though her bruises still throbbed with memory. At last, she drew in a shaky breath. "I ran from a man who wanted to own me. Thought he had a right to break me down. I couldn't take another day of it." Her voice cracked, and for a heartbeat she seemed ashamed for speaking aloud. Jacob's jaw tightened, but his tone stayed calm. "Then he's a fool for not seeing your worth. And if he comes looking," his eyes hardened, steel flashing beneath the warmth, "he'll find out real quick that you're not alone anymore." Clara's confession hung heavy in the firelit room. She pulled Jacob's coat tighter around her shoulders, as if the warmth could shield her from memories that still clawed at her. For the first time since arriving, her eyelids grew heavy, exhaustion overtaking fear. Jacob guided her to the spare room, laying a quilt over her slight frame. He lingered at the door, watching as sleep finally claimed her, and in that moment, he made a silent vow. Whatever shadows from her past came calling, they would have to go through him first. Morning broke with a sharp knock at the ranch gate. Jacob stepped out onto the porch, his instincts already coiled. Two men on horseback waited, their faces half hidden beneath the brims of their hats. One of them, broad-shouldered, with eyes like cold stone, met Jacob's stare with a dangerous calm. "We're looking for a runaway," the man said, voice low and edged. "Belongs to me. Name's Clara." Jacob's hand tightened against the post, his body steady as a rock though his blood simmered. "Nobody belongs to you," he answered flatly. "And there's no Clara here you'll be tackin'." The man's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Careful, rancher. You don't want trouble." Jacob tipped his hat low, his voice iron. "You brought it the moment you rode onto my land." The two strangers shifted in their saddles, hands never straying far from the revolvers at their hips. The morning air felt heavy, still, like the land itself was holding its breath. Jacob's jaw was set, his stance wide and unyielding. Inside the house, Clara stirred at the sound of voices. When she peeked through the curtain, her heart lurched. She knew that broad frame, that cruel tilt of the mouth. Fear clawed at her chest, but then her gaze fell on Jacob. He stood tall, solid as an oak, refusing to bend. Something in her steadied. "Step aside," the man barked, his patience thinning. "That girl's mine. She's good at runnin', but I always get what's mine." Jacob's voice was calm, but steel ran beneath it. "You've mistaken her for property. She's a woman with her own name, her own will, and you won't lay a hand on her again." His fingers brushed the butt of his revolver, a warning rather than a boast. Before the man could spit another word, Clara pushed open the door. Her bare feet hit the porch, trembling but certain. "My name is Clara," she said, her voice louder than she thought possible. "And I don't belong to you. Not anymore." Jacob glanced at her, pride flickering in his eyes. Standing shoulder to shoulder, they faced the threat together, her fear giving way to something stronger, and his vow becoming more than words. The ranch yard went silent except for the restless snort of the horses. The man's eyes narrowed, fury flashing as Clara's words struck harder than any bullet. He spat into the dirt, his hand twitching toward his revolver. Jacob shifted subtly, his thumb brushing the leather strap that held his holster closed. His voice cut through the air like a whip. "I'd think real hard before you try. 'Cause I won't miss." For a tense moment, no one moved. Clara's breath came fast, but she didn't flinch. She stood just behind Jacob, chin lifted, every ounce of fear burning into defiance. The second rider, the younger of the two, glanced uneasily at her, then at Jacob. His grip on the reins tightened, but he didn't reach for his gun. "Boss," he muttered, "maybe it ain't worth it. She don't wanna go. And this man, he means what he says." The older man's jaw worked, rage tightening every muscle in his frame. But he saw the steel in Jacob's eyes, the way his hand hovered ready. With a sharp curse, he yanked his reins and jerked his horse around. "This ain't over," he growled, riding off in a storm of dust. The younger rider followed, casting one last look back, less anger, more regret. Only when the sound of hooves faded did Jacob lower his hand. Clara sagged against the porch post, tears spilling freely now, not from fear, but from the weight lifting at last. Jacob turned, steady and sure, and touched her shoulder gently. "They won't take you," he said. "Not while I'm here, not ever." And for the first time in years, Clara believed it. That night, the house felt different. The shadows no longer seemed so heavy, and the silence wasn't frightening, it was peaceful. Clara sat by the fire, her feet bandaged, wrapped once again in Jacob's coat. She could still hear the echo of the man's threat, but stronger than that was Jacob's steady promise. Jacob set a steaming mug of coffee beside her before taking the chair across the hearth. For a while, they said nothing, just listened to the pop of the logs. At last, Clara whispered, "I thought I'd never get away. Never be free." "You are free," Jacob answered, his tone quiet but unshakable. "And you'll stay that way. Not because I said so, but because you found the strength to stand up to him." He gave a faint smile. "I just happened to be close enough to back you." Clara looked into the flames, her eyes glistening. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, not as if she were broken, but as if she were strong. For the first time, she felt something inside her begin to mend. Later, as she drifted toward sleep, she caught herself watching Jacob. His broad shoulders, his weathered face softened by lamplight, he was as steady as the land itself. And though she didn't dare say it aloud, a fragile hope began to bloom in her heart. Maybe this ranch wasn't just a place of refuge. Maybe it could be home. Days turned into weeks, and Clara slowly found her footing in the quiet rhythm of ranch life. She rose with the sun, learning to gather eggs from the hens and mend small tears in the work shirts Jacob left draped by the door. She still startled at sudden noises, but each day her smile grew easier, her laughter a little less guarded. Jacob watched the change with a quiet pride. He never pressed her with questions, never demanded more than she was ready to give. Instead, he offered steady hands and silent company, fixing fence posts side by side, or sharing coffee on the porch as the prairie stretched endless and golden before them. One afternoon, while tending the horses, Clara let her hand linger on the velvety muzzle of a chestnut mare. "She doesn't shy from me anymore," Clara said softly. Jacob, leaning on the rail, replied, "Animals know. They can tell when someone's heart is healing." His gaze lingered on her, warm and unspoken. That night, over a simple supper, Clara laughed, a sound that startled even her. It was light, unburdened, and Jacob's chest tightened at the sound. For a fleeting moment, the house felt whole, like it had been waiting all along for a voice like hers to fill it. But as the fire burned low, Jacob's eyes drifted to the window. In the distance, a single rider moved along the ridge, silhouetted against the fading light. He said nothing, not wanting to stir Clara's fears, but he knew the past wasn't finished with them yet. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of biscuits and strong coffee. Jacob was already at the stove, moving with an ease that surprised her. "Didn't take you for a cook," she teased, her voice still rough with sleep. He glanced over his shoulder, a rare grin tugging at his mouth. "Don't spread it around. A man's got to keep some secrets." Clara chuckled softly, one of those small, unexpected laughs that felt like a victory in itself. After breakfast, Jacob saddled 2 horses and gestured toward the open range. "Come with me. You've been cooped up too long." Clara hesitated, old fear tugging at her, but the steady assurance in his eyes coaxed her forward. They rode side by side across the prairie, the wide sky stretching forever above them. Clara breathed deep, the wind tangling in her hair, and for the first time since she'd fled, she felt a flicker of freedom that wasn't bound by fear. When they paused at a creek, Jacob helped her down, his hand lingering at her waist just a little longer than necessary. But as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Clara caught sight of something that chilled her newfound peace: fresh hoofprints cutting across the ridge, too close to the ranch for chance. Her pulse quickened, and she turned to Jacob, who had already noticed. His jaw tightened, his hand brushing the butt of his revolver. "Looks like the past is riding closer," he said grimly. Then, softer, for her ears alone, "But this time, Clara, you won't face it alone."